But I want to move on now to the co-main event. You know, the theme of the night and the title fights were, you know, the challenger stealing the belt, and the other overlaying theme is not having an answer for anything that the challenger brought to the champion.
Right.
And that was even more personified in the co-main event to me than it was in the main event.
Yeah.
Alexa Grasso had nothing for Valentina Shevchenko.
No.
And this was a bit surprising to me. You called this one right. I got this one wrong. You know, and I just basically went off of the old adage that it's this, and this goes back to boxing days, even before UFC and MMA days. If a champion loses his or her belt to a challenger and then gets a rematch, now I know the last one was a draw. Alexa got the submission, there was a draw. But if the champion gets their rematch a year or so later, all that's going to happen is the then challenger, now champion, is going to beat the former champion quicker and more emphatically than they did the first time. You know, time is not on anybody's side as far as combat sports are concerned, especially for the lighter weight classes. Valentina's almost 37 years old. You know, we know about the 35 curse, Bilal Muhammad, but now we got to start talking about the 35 benefit because Bilal Muhammad just showed us that it's, you know, he's immune to it, and so did Valentina Shevchenko.
It's still a rarity in the sport.
Those two are a rare breed, but Valentina looked phenomenal.
Amazing.
She was right there dialed in on the feet. All the striking exchanges she was winning. I personally, you know, when she went for those first few takedowns, I was like, man, those were, my first thought is beautiful takedown, well timed, well executed. But second thought is, why? I mean, she was, you know, cracking her on the feet. She was dominating. I think Valentina's a chip on her shoulder kind of fighter.
Yeah.
She got dominated the first fight, submitted by rear naked choke. I think she wanted to submit Alexa, even though she could hang with her on the feet and was winning most of the exchanges on the feet. But everything in that fight, and you know, and I'm not one to criticize the commentary that often, and I'm certainly not the martial artist that Daniel Cormier or Joe Rogan are, but sometimes they say things that are a bit perplexing to me, like some of those guillotine attempts that Alexa had. They were like, oh, that's in deep, that's in deep. And Alexa's elbow's like halfway out of the frame of the screen. And I'm like, that's really not that deep of a guillotine. Valentina's, like, if I were to be watching that on mute, I wouldn't have thought that Valentina was in danger. But now, you know, all of a sudden a former UFC champion and Joe Rogan, who's got, you know, several decades worth of mixed martial arts and martial arts experience, is saying this is deep, this is deep. I'm like, should I rethink what I'm seeing here? Because I'm not seeing a deep submission. So personally, I don't think many of those submission attempts that Alexa had were even remotely close to being finished. And so that makes it even more of just a one-sided domination by Valentina. 50-45 on all three judges' scorecards. That was the right call. And look, the bullet's back at 36 and a half years old. She looks as good as ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I will say, and I think everybody in the MMA community will agree with me on this, nobody likes to be the champion more than Valentina Shevchenko.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing could be said. Nobody hates being a contender or anything but the champion.
Or losing,
more than Valentina. So going into this fight, I chose Valentina because I think skill-wise, she still is the best female fighter in the world. I think on the feet, she still is the best. Alexa's got some answers for her because she can't get off the offense in the striking realm near like she can against all the other girls that she's been fighting leading up to the Grasso trilogy. But I think, you know, Grasso came out there and looked flat. She looked like she was a step behind the whole time. There was a speed disadvantage for sure. And I think Valentina's one of those people that really likes to stick it to you. Kind of, you know, we've seen this throughout her career for a long time. If you're good at something, she wants to beat you at that. Now, we never really saw her lose via something, rear naked choke, and then go back and want to get it. But you saw at the very end of the first round, she jumped. She was in top position and quickly found her way to the back, body triangle, and was trying to get that rear naked choke. So I think she's one of those petty fighters that's like, you submitted me like that, never going to happen again. In fact, I'm going to do it to you to prove something. And I will push back on you a little bit with the striking and grappling because this was a full display of mixed martial arts. And while, yes, I do think that if it would have stayed on the feet for all 25 minutes, Valentina probably would have still gotten her hand raised. But the way she was able to mix in those takedowns and show people, look, I'm not afraid to go on the ground with Alexa. I'll go right down there. I'll beat her up from there. I'll stay on top position the whole time. Alexa did have some decent moments where she was trying to reverse things and scramble and stuff.
Good butterfly guard, stuff like that.
Yeah, she was able to implement some defense from her back, but that's never where you want to be in a fight. You're losing the fight even if you have somebody in your guard. If they're on top of you and landing some stuff on the top, you're in trouble. So Grasso, I don't think it was her worst performance ever, but Valentina knew exactly what to anticipate, exactly what to look for, and she had a flawless game plan. And I will say the similarity between the main and the co-main stuck out to me because I thought Merab was going to have a similar style to Valentina in that fight. I thought he was going to strike, wait for Grasso to return strikes, change levels, and shoot in just like Valentina did. He did the opposite, but it worked out really well for Valentina to throw a few strikes, make sure Grasso was on the return when she would change levels. And until she saw Grasso's aggression moving towards her, she just stayed on the outside and tried to strike with her. You know, she threw that 1-2-3 a lot, and she would land a hook on the side. And a couple of times she would land it twice. She would kind of throw a double lead hook, which was really nice, well-timed, and Grasso kept getting hit by it. I think 2 or 3 different times in different rounds, she got hit by the same combination. So I think Valentina had everything buttoned up. There's no guesswork in her camps. There's no just like shot in the dark. She's going to do what she came in to do. And last night was a perfect example of that. She went out there with a flawless game plan. And I think she did want to go for that finish. But the statement that she made against Grasso kind of settled their trilogy. I don't think we need to see it for a 4th time. What if that goes to a draw? And then we got 2 more fights we have to not look forward to. So I think Valentina is back to being champ. I don't think there was any way she was going to leave that place without the belt strapped around her. And I don't know what's going to happen next. I know there's a great French fighter, Fiorot.
Fiorot, Manon Fiorot. She was the backup for this fight.
And I think that's a great stylistic matchup. Very exciting fight for the fans to see Valentina and Fiorot go at each other. But Grasso, her stock doesn't go down that much. I think she's still going to be a thorn in the side for a lot of the 125ers. But the division has belonged to Valentina for a long time. And to see her back in the championship category, it feels like it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I say put Alexa in a #1 contenders fight. Maybe, you know, so either Fiorot or Rose. You know, Rose has kind of come up to 125 and is staking her claim as a potential title challenger.
Right.
So maybe you want to throw Rose in there with Valentina. I think that's a good stylistic matchup
Big
for
names.
Valentina. 2 big names. Valentina, you know, also has fought at 35. You know, if you look at the landscape of women's 135 right now,
She could take that belt tomorrow.
It's a little rough.
Yeah.
It's a little rough.
Raquel Pennington.
Yeah, Raquel, and then Juliana Pena is coming up, is fighting her for the belt. So the women's 135 could use some heavy lifting, to say the absolute least.
Right.
Zhang Wei Li could always come up to 125, make things interesting.
Right.
I say throw Alexa in there with either Fiorot or Rose. See what shakes out there. Whichever one you don't decide to throw Alexa in there with, put in a title fight. Probably the backup. That's the right thing to do. If somebody shows up, makes weight, you know, let them fight for a title next. And
one thing I'll say, because the performance Valentina put on was very impressive.
Yeah.
But when she got on the microphone, and I counted English, Spanish, and Thai. 3 different languages that are not anywhere similar
and
to
her
each other.
native tongue as well.
Right, yeah. Kyrgyzstan, I think she shouted out them for a moment. I couldn't keep up because she was changing languages so much. But her post-fight speech, the dance, everything was just as impressive as her performance. I mean, when people talk about her being the spy, it kind of makes sense. You're like, she speaks 8 languages. She's a sharpshooter. She's an absolute killer in unarmed combat. So I love Valentina as the champion. Like I said at the beginning of this segment, there was no way Valentina wasn't going to win that fight. She doesn't care if it was more boring than Derek Lewis versus Francis Ngannou. She was going to get her hand raised. And I just don't think Grasso had that same mentality going in. I think Grasso, skill-wise, is still right there with her, but Valentina proved that it's the mental side of things and that competitive edge that really pushed her over the top, and that's the reason she's the best in the world.
Yeah, and future's bright for Alexa Grasso. Valentina's pushing 40. She's not going to be in this game a whole lot longer.
5
I
more
see,
fights, maybe.
yeah, maybe 3, 4, 5 fights, and Valentina's going to call it a day.
I think she should go for champ status. I think as soon as they can possibly get her in a 35 fight, don't take her 25 belt from her. Put her in there. Get a champ in the females world. I think that would be a big move for the UFC. Her and Amanda had 2 fights, so it didn't really make sense at that point. But now you've got Raquel and Juliana. That's easy money for Valentina.
This is not Amanda Nunes' 135 division.
Right.
This is a whole. This is ripe for the picking for Valentina Shevchenko.
Yeah, far
and
cry.
Yeah, she could certainly take it. So